Another day of Toad consciousness here in the Culture Bunker. Let's look at two very useful questions that you should be asking a lot. And I certainly wish I could convince kids to ask these questions, because kids are very impressionable. They hear stuff, they take it in, and then it becomes part of sometimes confused or ornate beliefs that are not exactly supported by the evidence. So whenever I'm talking to young people these days, especially teenagers or later teens that are on their way to going to college or university, I try to get into their mind the idea to always ask, what is your evidence? What is your evidence for this belief? How do you know that this is so? And I encourage them to ask this question as frequently as they can get away with it and still maintain rapport. I think it's a marvelous combination if you can have a high rapport situation, a feeling of trust and willingness to share information. That is a very important ground position to be on. And yet also maintain one foot firmly on the stance of, how do you know this? What is your evidence for this? And then if you're comfortable with that, move to the next step, and this is a kind of a denominalization of the evidence procedure. So if you have a somewhat nominalized evidence procedure, you're saying, what is your evidence? And if you think about that kind of in a visual spatial way, that's just like saying, okay, lay out your evidence points here on this imaginary surface, and then we can examine these like we're examining physical objects or something. To move to a denominalized state, a more dynamic state, say, what was the process you used to arrive at this belief? Or how did you come to believe this? I tend to think that if you build into the question, you build a certain process assumptions into the question, you're going to get a lot richer map of where that person began, the steps they moved through, and how they ended up having an attitude or a belief or something which they believe is a component now, a solid part of reality. This is especially effective when you're dealing with people that have very, very strong beliefs that have questionable evidentiary basis. So instead of just saying, well, what is your evidence for that? If someone has what you would think of as an untenable belief, and you say, well, what is your evidence for that? They may be able to lay out the same package of evidence that they were taught or they were given as evidence to support that belief. But they've also been taught through the installation of some often interesting meta-beliefs not to question the validity of that fine-grained material that supports their so-called belief. The game changes quite a bit, and it becomes a much more interesting intellectual game. Instead, when you ask, could you please lay out for me the process you used to arrive at that belief? How did you walk me through your journey from the beginning when you got the original idea that you would move toward this belief, how you moved through the various stages of building this belief, and what led to the final form of this belief. I think you'll find, if you ask that question, how was it that you came to believe this? What path did you follow to come to believe this? How did you work through your thoughts to arrive at this belief, or to allow you to feel confident that this phenomenon is real or true for you? And when you start denominalizing the belief process, some very, very fascinating and rather wonderful fireworks start to go off in the mind of the believer or the unbeliever, depending on how you frame that, how you think about that. So try that. And especially, I cannot recommend more highly if you've got teenage kids going to college, or you're around children. Teach them to ask the first question, what is your evidence? How do you know that's true? What makes you so sure that's true? There's a wonderful, wonderful meta-model challenge, a sleight of mouth challenge you can use, and it's a beautiful inversion of this. I picked this up off a sleight of mouth course, which was, how would you know if that isn't true? Okay, now think about that for a second. How would you know if that was not true? That also tends to set off the how would you know that isn't true question, or how would you know if that were not so, or how would you know if your belief were faulty? Because then that sets the mind into a wonderful internal search for how it would seek disconfirming evidence, or how it would go about seeking a disconfirming path of discovery. So use those. Ask people quite a bit. If they say something like, I know this is so, this is absolutely so, this is holy writ, this is guaranteed, there, you can't go wrong with it, this is the truth. Ask them, how would you know if it isn't true? How would you know if that isn't so? Or ask them about the path they used to arrive at that belief. So how did you come to believe that? Help me understand. If I were to stand in your shoes and understand how you came to have that belief, what path would I have taken? Okay? So try those on. Check those out. I think you're going to find those are very powerful and unsettling in interesting ways, and sometimes they're real game changers in discussions. Give them a shot. All right? We'll talk tomorrow.